of your time to share the Rails Hyperstack gem with you. Hyperstack is getting ready for our 1.0 release, and so I thought it'd be a good time to have a look at some of the great features of Hyperstack and hopefully get some feedback from you all out there on any last-minute changes or improvements that we might be able to make before we release. We're going to look at a single-page app, a classical to-do app. It's written in less than 100 lines of code. It includes server-side persistence and push updates. It's written in 100% Ruby, and like everything in Hyperstack, it's production ready. The integration with your Rails app is straightforward. In this case, what we do is we route all URLs to the Hyperstack controller, which is built in, and tell it to mount our app. There you go. It's that simple. Now, if you have an existing app and you'd like to use Hyperstack, you can mount components using helpers from your views or your existing controller. So integrating Hyperstack, whether it's in a new app or an existing app, is really easy. Let's look at a component. Component are subclasses of hypercomponent, and here we have our top-level component, and it's what's called a router, and usually a top-level component is a router. It takes care of managing the state of the application and keeping it in sync with the URL. So as I change the state here, I'm going to go from the all to active, and you'll see that the URL changed to active up here. And likewise, when I go to completed, it changes to completed. If I go back, it goes back. So that's all a router does, is it maintains state synchronization between the app itself and the URL. Components, very typically, this is like 30 lines of code, and really can be very small, and then you nest them. So here we have the app component then mounts the index component. The index component, in turn, iterates through all of our to-dos, and for each to-do mounts a to-do item component, and a to-do item component displays an individual to-do. Very typical structure of your Hyperstack app. Now, key part of Hyperstack is that your data is persisted to the server and synchronized on the client, and we do that using ActiveRecord, Rails ActiveRecord. So our to-do model, that's our database table, has two columns, completed and title, and it has a couple of scopes, completed and active, and that's all described in the usual way in our Rails application. So we don't do any extra work to make this work on the client. Hyperstack does it all for you. The model that we have here is running simultaneously on the clients and on the server, and it's being synchronized dynamically. You don't need any extra code to make that happen. So let's watch that work. Here we're going to go in and got all of our components. Whoops. Yeah, I've got all of our components displayed. We'll go up here and we'll check off this component, and it checks off down here. We'll go up here, we'll add another component, and it appears down in this browser. And this is an incognito browser, and this is a regular browser. So these are completely, don't have any knowledge of each other. Likewise, if I'm looking at the active scope, there's only one active to do, and if we make another one active, they both show up. Okay? So it's that simple. How does that happen in the code? Well, the code's very straightforward. It's just using ActiveRecord methods to do all the work for you. So we're displaying the to-do title. So it's an attribute of the database table, and ActiveRecord takes care of making that method available to you. And likewise with completed. And then when we change a to-do, like so when we check this completed status, what we're doing there is we're clicking on the checkbox input, clicking it, which causes a change in its state, and then that runs the update method of the to-do instance and changes the state to its opposite. That's it. So you're just using all of these methods, update, destroy, title, are all the standard ActiveRecord methods. So you don't have to learn anything new. If you've got the basics of ActiveRecord, you're good to go. And this also works for relationships of all sorts and scopes. So let's go on to another feature of Hyperstack is we support active support. And because what would it be without active support? It certainly wouldn't be much like Rails. So we've got, just for example, in our to-do, we've got pluralize, which we're using so that as the number of active to-dos changes, right now we've got 1, and change it to 2. And then our item changes to items. And that's all handled by the inflector pluralize. It's all built in. We've got other methods like camelize, and just so many others, but all documented and all using the standard Ruby library and ActiveRecord classes. Our naming conventions really make the code easy to read. You've got over 100, 200 SVG and HTML tags, so to distinguish them from the rest of methods we use all uppercase. And they really are constants. You wouldn't be changing how they work. So they act as constants, but they are also acting as method calls. So got section URL here, and then when we invoke a application component, we use the component's class name and then just call it as a method. And again, that makes it very easy to spot that we're invoking an application component there. And then all of the other methods, params, and variables use normal snake case. So it makes the code easy to read, and if you're using a syntax highlighter, colorizer, it really makes everything stand out, and you can navigate through new unknown pieces of code very quickly and easily. It's also easy to send and receive callbacks and events. The on method attaches event handlers to your tags. So here we've got the change event, and so as I type code here, okay, I'm executing this change event handler, and I'm updating my to-do model, and the title of the to-do model is being updated. And then when I hit enter, it sends the enter event, which saves the to-do, and then we fire off an application event called save. So we declare that by saying fire save. So this edit item fires the save event, and then we fire it by calling save with an exclamation mark. And then that's received by the component that mounted edit item. So in this case, we're looking at the instance of edit item that is mounted by the header. So you can see in the header, there's edit item, and then there's on save. So that captures the save event, and then it does its thing. And here we actually see, it's nice because we can see how state management's handled in Hyperstack. It's built on top of the React state methodology, but in Hyperstack, it's very simple. All of your object instance data can be reactive state. And all you need to do is just flag it with the mutate method as you change the state, and that will take care of under the hood updating any components that were depending on the value of that state. So there's no reason to ever, you don't have to do manual subscription or notification methods that you would normally have to do in other systems. It's all automatic in Hyperstack and just glued together for you under the hood. A couple other nice little features to look at. A Hyperstack development environment comes loaded with a hot reloader. So if I wanted to change this string to my to-dos and save, it instantly updates on the browser. Great feature for debugging. Also, if you're working with a UX designer, you can experiment very easily and quickly with adding new components or changing the order of them, and see how things look instantaneously. It works with your CSS class files as well. Finally, a great thing about Rails and the Ruby ecosystem, which I love, is the focus on testing and test-driven development. Hyperstack's no exception. We've got extensions to RSpec that make testing in this environment really easy. So we have a little test spec here for our app, and we're going to run this spec right now. And we'll just use our Atom RSpec run current spec. What that's going to do is mount our to-do app, and then it's going to find the new to-do and then send the keys hello followed by the enter key, which will save it. And then on the server side, we're going to check to make sure that, in fact, on the server, did we increase the count of to-dos to 1, and then we expect the last to-do title to equal hello. And our spec passed, and that's great. So there you go. You've got everything you need to build great apps, 100% Ruby, leveraging off of the goodness of Rails, Ruby, and React in one integrated package. I hope you'll check out hyperstack.org soon and give us any feedback about how you like the system. Thanks a lot.